At their age, Bridget and Dawn should be enjoying peaceful days together, but life has other plans. A few years before retirement, Dawn suddenly loses his job. He tries everything he can to find work again, but no one wants to hire an older man. Each rejection chips away at his confidence. Once living comfortably, Dawn slowly slips into bankruptcy and debt. With no other options, he decides to sell their house just to pay it all off. One day, at a friend's gathering, Bridget overhears that Dawn plans to sell their home. Shocked, she rushes back to confront him, and it's true. Dawn admits it plainly, saying it's their only way out. But Bridget refuses to accept that. She insists that Dawn keep trying to find a job so they won't have to lose everything. Still, Dawn has already given up. He tells her to accept their situation and just live with what little they have left. Seeing her husband's despair, Bridget decides to take matters into her own hands. Welcome to Mad Money.
Mad Money.
Bridget then starts applying for jobs herself. Despite her impressive education, every company turns her away because of her age. Employers prefer younger workers who are faster, more efficient, and as they say, more presentable. Even so, Bridget refuses to give up. She keeps searching, desperate to earn enough to pay off her husband's debts. Then one afternoon, their housekeeper reminds her that she hasn't been paid for 3 months. Embarrassed and stressed, Bridget opens up about their financial troubles. Feeling sympathy, the housekeeper suggests something unexpected, a cleaning job at the Federal Reserve Bank, which just happens to have a vacancy. Bridget takes the advice and applies. Soon, she's hired as a cleaning staff member. On her first day, her supervisor shows her around the massive building. Everything seems normal until she walks into one particular room. What she sees there stops her cold. Stacks upon stacks of cash, piled high, recorded on security cameras everywhere. Later, she's taken to the currency destruction room, where she meets a worker named Nina. There, Bridget watches in disbelief as huge bundles of real money are shredded right before her eyes. She learns that the bank's job is to destroy old or damaged bills that have already been replaced by new ones. The goal is to keep the total amount of money in circulation stable. But as Bridget stares at those endless piles of cash being reduced to dust, a dangerous thought begins to form in her mind. What if she could take some of it, just a small portion before it's destroyed? That night, she searches the internet, studying how the process works, looking for a way to take the money without being caught. The next day at work, Bridget notices on the surveillance monitors that one of the workers is carrying a large stack of bills to the shredder. Watching closely, another idea sparks in her mind. Maybe she doesn't have to do it alone. Maybe she can convince someone else to help her pull off the perfect heist. At work, Bridget studies every security camera, mapping their angles and blind spots for later. She even checks each trash bin, looking for any opening that could make a theft possible. When her shift ends, she watches how the staff are inspected at the exit, noting every step and every rule. On the way home, she wonders how anyone could resist, day after day, destroying so much cash. The thought lingers. She floats the idea to Nina, but Nina shuts it down. In her experience, no one gets a single bill past the system. The surveillance is too advanced. Bridget keeps thinking. She has noticed that the bins are not always emptied by staff, which could make them a temporary hiding spot. Nina is unmoved, not interested, and tells Bridget to drop it. Days pass. Bridget tries again, but Nina still refuses, fully aware of the risks. Bridget is frustrated. She knows she cannot pull this off alone. She returns with proof, a padlock that matches the bank's hardware. Nina bristles at the pressure. The next day, Nina pays closer attention to the lock on a cash container. It matches what Bridget showed her. That detail changes something. She pulls Bridget aside. Nina is raising a child on her own, tuition bills are piling up, and she is running out of options. She agrees to the plan, on one condition: every move must be careful and precise. That night, Bridget and Nina bring in a third person, Jackie, a young worker with no dependents. Jackie says yes in an instant, chasing adrenaline, and coming from a family that has always been short on money. Her edge worries Nina, but her boldness could help. They set ground rules. Simple hand signals for communication, clear roles, and one more warning for Jackie: cut back on the drugs. Anything that clouds judgment could ruin the job. The next morning, Bridget hides a padlock key in her waistband so it will not trip the metal detector. She clears security. At breakfast, she signals Nina and Jackie, time to swap the lock. Then Jackie backs out. A bad feeling stops her. The sudden change angers Nina, and they call off the attempt. As they are heading out, the bank manager, Glover, orders a full sweep: every team, every employee. Bridget and Nina trade a glance. Jackie's bad feeling was not nothing. Something in the air has shifted, and they know it. The next morning, Bridget gives a subtle signal to Nina: telling her it's time to begin. Nina quietly passes the message to Jackie, and this time, Jackie agrees to join in. Her gut tells her that today will go smoothly. Bridget starts the operation carefully. She swaps out the padlock on one of the cash containers with her own, pretending to clean while keeping an eye on the security cameras. Everything goes perfectly. She passes the box number to Jackie, who retrieves it before it can be sent to the shredding room. Jackie moves fast, calm, and unnoticed. With everything going according to plan, Bridget signals Nina to replace the original lock once the job is done. Meanwhile, Nina works at the shredding station under the watchful eyes of Sean, one of the security guards. Just when things could have gone wrong, their boss, Glover, catches Sean staring at the monitors for the wrong reasons. Embarrassed, Sean quickly redirects the camera away, unknowingly giving the thieves the perfect window. Jackie, now carrying the cash box, pauses by the elevator. She unlocks it, grabs a few stacks of money, and hides them inside a trash bin, exactly as Bridget instructed. With her earphones in and music playing, she blends right in. Then she wheels the bin to Nina's section, giving her a quick signal. Nina smiles, knowing Jackie pulled it off flawlessly. Later, Bridget checks the trash bin filled with bundles of cash and moves it to the restroom. There, the women regroup and split the money, hiding it in every spot they can think of.
Now I've got 2 readings to love control top.
For the first time, their plan has worked. They've actually done it. But before heading home, everyone has to pass a security check. Nina suddenly notices Jackie hasn't concealed her share properly as it's sticking out and could easily be seen. Panicking, Nina flirts with Sean to distract him, buying Jackie precious seconds to fix her mistake. Bridget joins in, subtly giving hand signals to help coordinate. At the same time, Glover senses that something isn't right. Without wasting a second, he heads straight to the inspection area. The sudden tension jolts Jackie into awareness, so she quickly fixes the cash she nearly forgot to hide. The whole team is on edge, terrified that their secret might be exposed. But somehow, luck is on their side. They pass the inspection without getting caught and walk out of the bank with the stolen money safely hidden. That evening, the 3 of them gather at Bridget's house, their hearts racing as they spill the cash onto the table. When they count it, the total shocks them. It's around $100,000.
Keep the change.
Their celebration, however, is cut short when Don walks in. His eyes widened at the sight of the cash stacked high across the table. Bridget has no choice but to tell him the truth. He's stunned, unable to believe that his wife has actually committed a crime. She tries to justify it, saying the money was destined for destruction anyway. Don, ever the moral one, warns her to stop before things spiral out of control. But Bridget refuses. She's tasted freedom and refuses to go back to a life of debt and struggle. The next day, Nina visits her son's school. She pays off all the overdue tuition fees and even donates money to help build a new library. The school staff are amazed, calling her one of their new benefactors. From then on, the trio continues their scheme. Each time, the operation becomes smoother, more confident, and far more rewarding. Bridget clears every debt, saving their home from being sold. Nina turns from a struggling single mother into a respected donor. And Jackie, once broke and reckless, now begins saving for her future and even dreams of marriage. 6 months have passed. The women gather again, celebrating how far they've come and how much they've stolen without ever being caught. Bridget, still hungry for more, insists they should keep going. Dawn, disapproving, warns her not to get greedy. Greed, he says, is where everything falls apart. Even Nina agrees, cautioning her to spend wisely so she doesn't raise suspicion. Tension flares between Bridget and Nina. Bridget reminds everyone that the idea was hers in the first place. Nina fires back, saying it never would have worked without teamwork. Bridget pauses, realizing she's right. Without Nina and Jackie, none of this would have been possible. But that doesn't stop her. The very next day, Bridget walks into a jewelry store and buys herself a diamond ring she's always wanted, which is worth $62,000, paid in full without a moment's hesitation. Later, at work, Nina notices the ring. Alarmed, she warns Bridget that such a flashy purchase will only draw attention. Bridget laughs it off, claiming it's fake. Not convinced, Nina grabs the ring and flushes it down the toilet before Bridget can stop her. Bridget stands frozen, heartbroken, watching her dream ring disappear. A few moments later, Bridget, who has just swapped the padlock, tosses the key to Nina. But Nina isn't ready, and the key slips from her hand, dropping straight into the sink drain. Panic sets in immediately. If they can't unlock the container, their whole operation could be exposed. Bridget quickly remembers that there's a spare key stored in the drying room. The problem is, she's already been there once today, and returning could raise suspicion. That leaves only one option: Jackie. At first, Jackie refuses. She's terrified of getting caught. But knowing the plan will fail without her, she finally gathers her courage and heads toward the room. Meanwhile, through the security cameras, Glover notices something off about Bridget and Nina's behavior. He heads toward the restroom, confused by why Bridget has been in there so long. Thinking fast, Bridget covers her panic with anger, pretending to scold him about how dirty the place is and insisting she's just doing her job. Elsewhere, Jackie manages to grab the spare key. Just as she's about to stash it in the elevator, another employee suddenly appears. Thinking on her feet, she pretends to be annoyed, then discreetly throws the key that is wrapped in a piece of gum, where Bridget can later retrieve it. Moments later, Bridget arrives, picks up the hidden key, and rushes it to Nina, who's waiting anxiously by the container. She makes it just in time. Nina unlocks it, continuing the operation as planned. But not everything goes unnoticed. Sean, one of the guards, observes Nina closely and spots she's using a different key. That small detail sparks suspicion. He begins to piece things together. After work, Sean corners Nina privately. He knows she's been stealing. Nina, exhausted and ready to give up, tells him to do what he has to do. But Sean doesn't call the police. Instead, he demands to know who else is involved, insisting she stop before things get worse. That night, Nina meets with Bridget and Jackie to deliver the bad news. Sean has found out. He hasn't reported them yet, but he's warned her to quit. Bridget immediately wonders if Sean can be reasoned with or maybe even brought into their operation. Soon after, Nina meets Sean again, this time with an unexpected proposal: help them, and he'll have both the money and her affection. Sean is stunned and conflicted. But by the next day, he makes his choice. He agrees to join them on one condition. He wants Nina's love to be real, not just a reward for his silence. In time, their little operation grew bolder and easier, especially after Sean joined them. With a guard on the inside, the group moved faster and took bigger hauls. Nina, who had spent her life renting, finally bought a house of her own. Bridget upgraded too, moving into a much larger, more luxurious home. Jackie, who had no dependents, began to cover her own needs and plan a future with her partner. Then one day a government auditor named Chris visited the Federal Reserve to run an inspection. He was following up on reports of suspicious activity tied to 3 employees: Bridget, Nina, and Jackie. Chris's cold stare landed on Jackie as she carried a box stacked with bills, and he looked at Bridget with the same hard suspicion. At that moment, Bridget slipped and dropped some of her cleaning tools.
Whoopsie.
Panic hit when Bridget realized one of the padlocks had fallen, but by luck neither Glover, the other staff, nor Chris noticed anything important on the floor. Later, Glover pulled Chris aside to protest, insisting the bank never experienced theft, that staff were tightly monitored and access was limited. Chris replied that he had been watching for a month and was convinced some employees were colluding to steal. Glover bristled, stunned by the accusation. Chris left with a warning, hoping Glover was innocent, because if the manager were involved the consequences would be severe. Not long after, Dawn called Bridget to say Chris had been asking neighbors questions about him and their daily life. Dawn was terrified, worried they might all end up in prison. That evening the group met to figure out how to avoid getting caught. Bridget argued that if Glover and Chris had hard evidence, arrests would already have been made, so she believed the questioning was a tactic to force confessions. Then, unexpectedly, Jackie's boyfriend admitted he'd recently bought stocks worth more than $10,000 and seen a 17% gain. The news stunned everyone, because any transaction over $10,000 is automatically reported to the tax office, which could open a trail for investigators. Fear set in. They were under surveillance and at risk of being traced. Sean urged them to hide the stolen cash kept in their homes, since those piles would be damning evidence. He said they needed to disappear, quickly, before the net closed in. Sean pulls Nina aside and tells her it's time to come clean. If she turns herself in, maybe the punishment will be lighter. He's certain it's only a matter of time before the police close in. And he's right. That very night, their homes were put under surveillance. Detectives suspect they'll try to run. Panicking, the group scrambles to hide their stolen money. They stash it in walls, under floors, anywhere they can think of. But things start to spiral. Jackie and her boyfriend come up with a desperate plan to destroy the evidence. Moments later, an explosion rocks their house as their attempt to burn the cash has gone horribly wrong. Both are caught and taken into custody. Sean doesn't get far either. Just as he's about to leave, the police surround him and make the arrest. Nina tries to get rid of her share by burning it, but before she can finish, she too is caught. Meanwhile, Chris, who's been stationed outside Bridget's home, spots her leaving. He quietly follows as she drives off, waiting for the right moment to strike. Bridget checks into a hotel, hoping to hide until the chaos dies down. Before long, Dawn, Sean, Nina, Jackie, and her boyfriend are brought in for questioning. The police want to know how they pulled off a theft in one of the most secure facilities in the country. But the group stays loyal. No one confesses. They deny everything. The next morning, Chris finds Bridget calmly having breakfast, sipping a cappuccino as if nothing happened. He sits down and goes straight to the point, asking how much money they stole and how she planned it all. Bridget stays cool, refusing to admit a thing. She challenges him to show proof, and if he can't, she'll sue for false accusation. Later, she meets an old friend who is a lawyer and offers him a hefty payment to take her case. The money's enough to convince him. Soon, they head to the police station to demand the release of Dawn and the others. At the station, Glover is called in to confirm whether theft actually took place. Nervous about his own reputation, he reluctantly claims there was no evidence of any stolen money. Deep down though, he's furious and convinced Bridget, Nina, and Jackie are guilty. The police then confront Bridget's lawyer about the piles of cash found in their homes. The lawyer argues that owning large amounts of money isn't a crime because there's no law against it. With that, he asks for his clients to be released. Just as they're about to walk free, a tax official steps in. He points out that none of them have paid taxes on the fortune they've been hiding. After a tense negotiation, the group strikes a deal: no jail time, but every last dollar will be confiscated by the state. Finally, they're free. They step outside and breathe the fresh air again. The money's gone, but at least their freedom isn't. Each of them goes back to a quiet life, vowing never to steal again. 8 months later, Bridget, Nina, and Jackie reunite for the first time in ages. Nina is now married to Sean, no longer alone. Jackie and her boyfriend are planning their wedding, and just when it seems the past is behind them, Bridget surprises them both. Then she reveals a hidden stash of money she'd secretly kept, tucked away in their favorite restaurant. Nina and Jackie can hardly believe it. Bridget had outsmarted everyone, even the law. The three women share a knowing smile. Against all odds, they've still come out ahead. So the moral of the story is, if life gives you debt, just rob the Federal Reserve, but maybe skip the part where your house explodes.